Heather O'Rourke, star of Poltergeist, tragically died when she was just 12. Her last words were to her mother, "I love you too." Due to her fame, her family held a private funeral, where her mother left a heartbreaking gift in her daughter's casket. Born just 2 days after Christmas in 1975 in San Diego, California, her father worked as a carpenter while her mother worked as a seamstress. Funny enough, they already had a star on their hands. Heather's acting career would overshadow anything her parents ever accomplished, but she wasn't the only one in the family, with her sights set on the stars. Her older sister Tammy was also an actress. Sadly, even before Heather made her big screen debut, the demands of Hollywood were already straining the family. In 1981, Heather's parents went through a tough divorce. Only a few years later, in 1984, her mother Kathleen remarried. She tied the knot with Jim Peel, a part-time truck driver. By then, the family had relocated to a trailer park in Anaheim, California, far from the picture-perfect Hollywood life many might imagine. However, nothing could dim O'Rourke's rising star. While casting for his upcoming ghost-themed horror flick, Poltergeist, Steven Spielberg had a specific vision. The legendary director wanted a beatific 4-year-old child to play the role of Carol Anne Freeling, the innocent yet haunted star of his frightening film. Heather just so happened to be in the right place at the right moment. One day, Heather was having lunch at an MGM commissary with her mother and sister, who had landed a part in Pennies from Heaven. Then, in one of those only in Hollywood moments, Spielberg spotted his perfect star. The director knew instantly that Heather was the girl he had been searching for to star in his horror flick. There was just one question. Could she act? Despite the undeniable charm of her angelic looks, Spielberg still wanted to make sure that Heather could deliver on camera. But when the time came, little Heather blew her audition. When she tried to perform a scene in front of Spielberg where she was supposed to act scared, she couldn't stop laughing. Studio executives were probably rolling their eyes, but Spielberg saw her potential. Heather got something that few other Hollywood hopefuls get: a second chance. Despite her non-stop laughter, Spielberg couldn't shake the feeling that Heather was special. Although he initially doubted whether she could take the role seriously, he gave her another shot, asking her to return for a second audition. This time, with a scary storybook in hand. During her second audition, with the help of a scary book, Heather proved her star potential and gave Spielberg exactly what he was looking for. He asked her to scream, and scream she did. So much so, in fact, she ended up in tears. The audition was harrowing, but it sealed the deal. Spielberg had found his Carol Anne Freeling. Although Heather's iconic role nearly went to another little Hollywood hopeful, and one with some pedigree behind her. Even though Spielberg loved O'Rourke for Poltergeist, he had considered casting Drew Barrymore for the role. Instead, the director put Drew in E.T., the extraterrestrial. Barrymore didn't realize how lucky she was, because Poltergeist was cursed. The trouble on the set of Poltergeist started right away. One of the more intense scenes in the frightening feature involved a wind-blowing machine blowing toys into a closet as O'Rourke's character, Carol Anne, clung to her bed. But it was too much for the young actress to handle. On a busy set, surrounded by grown-ups who were supposed to protect her, O'Rourke completely fell apart. But at least there was one man in her corner. Steven Spielberg was seemingly the only one who understood the stress and strain of putting a young child through the rigors of filming a horror movie. When the veteran director saw how much the wind machine was affecting her, he immediately stopped filming. Spielberg himself then picked her up, calmed her down, and promised he wouldn't ask her to shoot that scene again. The two formed a truly special bond, but Spielberg wouldn't always be there to save her. Poltergeist might have terrified audiences when it hit theaters, but it was actually a surprisingly fun movie to make. In a heartwarming moment on the Poltergeist set, Oliver Robbins, Heather's co-star, recalled how Spielberg toasted the youngest cast member's birthday. He promised that when she turned 21, he'd buy her a bottle of her own. Sadly, she would never make it. Now, when Poltergeist premiered, young Heather O'Rourke instantly became a beloved child star. The New York Times described her as a key element of the film, noting that her wide eyes, long blonde hair, and soft voice made her unforgettable. Her haunting and emotionally compelling performance became the defining image of the series. In fact, she was basically all that anyone remembered. Even casual film fans have probably heard the famous line, "They're here."
They're here.
The immortal film quote was, of course, O'Rourke's line, and her chilling delivery made it a cultural phenomenon. Years later, she coined another iconic film quote with the equally spooky line, "They're back."
They're back.
in the sequel, cementing her place in American pop culture. She just needed the awards to prove it. Thanks in large part to Heather's performance, Poltergeist not only gained a cult following, but it was also a critical and commercial success. The film earned 3 Academy nominations, and Heather herself landed a nomination for a Young Artist Award. Unfortunately, she didn't snag the trophy, but she didn't exactly walk off the set empty-handed either. On screen, O'Rourke faced down haunted dolls and possessed toys, but off-screen, she loved her role's lighter side. And in a way, the role did land her some gold, just not Oscar gold. The studio allowed the child star to keep the goldfish that her character, Carol Anne, had in the film, giving her a small, uncursed piece of the Poltergeist experience. Of course, the money wasn't bad either. Most actresses have to work for years before they can earn big bucks, but not little Heather. For her performance in Poltergeist, O'Rourke earned between $35,000 and $100,000, a substantial sum for a young child actor in the early 1980s. Her breakout success not only made her famous, but also allowed her to financially help her family. With her newfound success, O'Rourke's family was able to move out of their trailer park. Thanks to the financial stability that her acting career provided, her family bought a house in Big Bear Lake, California. The move marked a big shift in their lifestyle and in O'Rourke's prospects. She seemed the furthest thing from cursed, and the good times were going to keep rolling for now. After Poltergeist, O'Rourke continued cashing in on her fame and became a regular on television. She starred alongside iconic Disney characters in Believe You Can and You Can, and she made appearances on several other shows. She even had a recurring role on Happy Days, showing that her talents went far beyond the horror genre. In fact, her talents even extended off-screen. When Heather wasn't busy gracing the screen with her presence, she was busy being president. Class president, that is. Despite her fame, she was a pretty normal child who enjoyed attending school. Between acting jobs, she attended Big Bear Elementary School, where she wasn't just a student, she was president of her 5th grade class. But the Poltergeist curse was getting ready to strike. Shortly after Poltergeist hit theaters, tragedy started to surround the movie. Dominique Dunn, who played Heather's older sister in the movie, lost her life after a physical altercation with her ex-boyfriend. The horrific event marked the beginning of an ominous set of events that fans began calling the Poltergeist curse. Cursed or not, Poltergeist had been a resounding commercial and critical success, and the studio wanted to cash in. Even with the loss of Dunn, under such tragic circumstances still looming overhead, MGM forged ahead on making a sequel. For Heather, however, it would not be as fun the second time around. On the set of Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, O'Rourke had a chilling real-life encounter. Let's just say that she wasn't acting when she looked terrified. The first time that the child actor saw her co-star, Julian Beck, who played the sinister Reverend Kane on set, his gaunt appearance frightened her so much that she burst into tears. She just didn't think anyone else would be as scared as she was. Despite being terrified while on set, O'Rourke wasn't impressed with the second Poltergeist film. In fact, she disowned it after its release, saying that it wasn't nearly as scary as it should have been. "I thought it was too boring," she admitted. "I don't think it would scare anyone." Unfortunately, she was right. The film practically became a parody of itself. Despite the failures of the second film, O'Rourke's famous lines, "They're here," from Poltergeist, and "They're back," from Poltergeist 2, became pop culture sensations. Over the years, other celebrities have tried to cash in on the child actor's fame, such as Jane Fonda, who quoted the line in her memoir, My Life So Far. Little Heather O'Rourke had a big impact on culture, but she wouldn't live to see it. Having appeared in both Poltergeist films, O'Rourke had no way of knowing that the dreaded Poltergeist curse had already gotten a hold of her. Tragically, the premiere of Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, would mark the last movie that the young actress would see released during her lifetime. It's hard to say that it was worth it. For her performance in Poltergeist 2, O'Rourke landed her second nomination in as many films. She was nominated for the Youth in Film Awards in the category Exceptional Performance by a Young Actress Starring in a Feature Film. Although she didn't take home the prize, the nomination was still a testament to her talent, or it was an omen of her frightful fate. The so-called Poltergeist curse struck again even before the release of the second film. Julian Beck, who had terrified Heather on set as the evil Reverend Kane, succumbed to his prolonged fight with stomach cancer just months before Poltergeist 2 hit theaters. Next, the curse was getting ready to claim its youngest victim. In January 1987, O'Rourke began feeling unwell, showing the first signs of what would later become a tragic medical emergency. While at home with her mother Kathleen, stepfather Jim Peel, and sister Tammy, Heather complained of a sudden and unexplained feeling of nausea, nothing too out of the ordinary. The poor family had no idea that this was the beginning of the end. Heather wouldn't stop complaining about this inexplicable feeling of nausea, so her mother Kathleen took the ailing child star to a medical facility in San Diego. Despite repeat visits, the doctors dismissed her symptoms as common flu. Kathleen recalled, quote, "They kept telling me she had the flu," quote, but the flu couldn't explain what happened next. Following her diagnosis, O'Rourke's symptoms only worsened, and they were anything but flu-like. Suddenly, O'Rourke's feet began to swell, shocking her mother and prompting her to take the child actor back to the hospital. There, doctors made a horrifying discovery. Heather had been infected with a parasite. The worst part was how Heather contracted the bug. Based on her success from the Poltergeist franchise, O'Rourke's parents had been able to move from their trailer park into a home in Big Bear Lake, but the Poltergeist curse had blighted their wealth. The doctors believed that Heather had contracted the parasite from the well water at their Big Bear Lake home. They hoped a little medication could undo the hex, and at first it seemed like it worked. When Heather began treatment with the medication Flagyl, her mother watched as her daughter made a miraculous recovery. Kathleen said, quote, "Essentially, Heather was fine," quote, noting that kids often recover quickly, but Kathleen, being an overprotective mother, took O'Rourke back to the doctors for a follow-up visit just before filming on Poltergeist 3 began. Just in case, Heather's doctors performed an X-ray and made another startling and terrible discovery. While the medication had cleared the parasite, Heather's X-ray revealed that she was still dealing with some serious inflammation. Doctors diagnosed the child star with Crohn's disease and prescribed her more medication to manage her symptoms, but the cure might have been worse than the disease. Heather began filming Poltergeist 3 in Chicago while on her new medication, but while her new meds reduced her internal inflammation, they caused swelling elsewhere, namely her face. Heather's mother recalled that the child star was, quote, "rather embarrassed about her chipmunk cheeks," quote. Thankfully, the swelling subsided, but the curse intensified. The dreaded Poltergeist curse made a nearly fatal return on the set of Poltergeist 3. While filming a car chase scene, a fiery explosion erupted, nearly injuring a crew member and destroying several cameras. Fortunately, O'Rourke hadn't been on set that day. Ever the professional, however, when she arrived on set the next day, her first question to director Gary Sherman was, quote, "Did you get the shot?" Quote. O'Rourke developed a close friendship with the Poltergeist 3's director, Gary Sherman, and his girlfriend. However, with all the drama associated with the franchise and the threat of the curse forever hovering over her head, O'Rourke made a big decision. She informed the studio that if there was ever a Poltergeist 4, it would be her last appearance in the series. However, fate had already determined her final appearance. In late January 1988, the O'Rourke family had just moved into a new apartment in Lakeside, California. There seemed to be no cause for concern until one morning, when without explanation, O'Rourke woke up and began vomiting. Shocked, but not too alarmed, O'Rourke's mother gave her Gatorade, hoping it would soothe her stomach. Sadly, it did not. The next morning, O'Rourke insisted she was well enough to go to school, but her mother knew something was wrong. O'Rourke couldn't even swallow the toast that her mother gave her. Her fingers and toes had turned blue, and her breathing became labored. Just then, O'Rourke collapsed, and her mother frantically called the paramedics. Sadly, it was already too late. Even as she slipped into septic shock, O'Rourke remained conscious when the paramedics arrived. The emergency responders asked her if she felt unwell, and she only meekly replied, "A little." As the paramedics rushed the child star to the hospital, her mother told her, "I love you," to which Heather simply replied, "I love you too." During the ambulance ride to the hospital, she suffered cardiac arrest. She then slipped into a state of unconsciousness. By the time she arrived at the hospital, the medical team said that she had technically passed to the other side. Miraculously, however, they managed to revive her. But it wasn't enough. While the medical staff had managed to revive O'Rourke, her condition remained precarious at best. They believed that her heart attack had been severe and informed her parents that her fixed pupils suggested brain damage. Worse yet, they suspected that her prior diagnosis of Crohn's disease had been incorrect and asked permission to perform exploratory surgery. The Poltergeist star, as it turned out, had an obstructed bowel. While they managed to remove the obstruction, it was already too late. At 2:43 p.m., the Poltergeist curse claimed its final and youngest victim. Despite her massive fame, O'Rourke had a private funeral service. Her family paid their final respects to her on February 4th, 1988, at Lakeside Memorial Chapel. The following day, they laid her to rest at Pierce Brothers in Westwood, California. Her mother, Kathleen, requested an open casket so she could say goodbye to her daughter one last time, and she had a fitting tribute for the fallen star. Before Heather's mother closed her daughter's casket, she placed a gold chain around her neck. The necklace had the letters that spelled out friend, while she herself kept the companion chain that spelled best. Heather had given her mother the matching pair for Christmas, saying that Kathleen was not just her mom, but her best friend. Now that was the short life of Heather O'Rourke. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button. And if you're interested in more celebrity and Hollywood stories, make sure to subscribe.